He is a distinguished writer, director, and actor. You know from a recent role in The Client, Grumpy Old Men, and the Burt Reynolds series Evening Shade. She was part of Roots, The Next Generation, the miniseries The Stand, and won an Emmy for her role in the Hallmark Hall of Fame presentation, Decoration Day. Together, their credits are too long to list, but they include films like Do the Right Thing and Jungle Fever, Broadway's Pearly Victorious, written also by Ossie Davis. Their latest project is a family venture, this time in collaboration with their son, Guy Davis. The legendary Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. Welcome. Yeah. Now,
how do you survive
how do you
that?
follow that? How do you follow that? You live here in the New York area, do you?
Well, we live just outside New York, in New Rochelle, but I grew up in Harlem. And so I've been
You
here.
grew up in Harlem? Mm-hmm. You've lived in the same place for a lot of years, haven't
Yes.
you?
Yeah, in New Rochelle, what, 32 years or so?
years.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. Tell me about the show with your son. What does ha-ha and homeboy mean? Two ha-has and a homeboy.
Two ha-has. He's a ha, I'm a ha. Together we're a ha-ha. I hope somebody doesn't say, ha, ha, like that. And homeboy, of course.
Well, the
because
reviews
he's
have
our
been
son.
good of your new show.
Very, very good. We're very pleased with that. And it's sprung from an idea that we've been entertaining for many years. You know, we sit around the table, and our son too is a little bit of a ha, you know. So we come together happily. But this is our first time on stage. You know, where night after night we've done.
Don't you get on each other's nerves and drive each other a little nuts out there? I mean, I working with parents and working with sons. I mean, is that tough or is it all right? You like each other enough to sort of hang out there and do it, or?
Well, I'm talking. You just jump right in, darling. I'm always aware, you know, that $1 zillion a minute on television.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
so I'm very conscious about
As
stuff.
a response to the question.
Response to the question.
You know, it's a delightful arrangement. In the first place, this really is the first time that we've worked in a close association over an extended period of time. And we feel grateful that Guy interrupted his schedule to
He's
join
a musician,
us.
right?
He's a musician.
He's a blues guitarist and folk guitarist, writer, actor.
We haven't had time to get on each other's nerves, and I think intuitively and instinctively we know how not to, how to disappear before that moment happens.
That's interesting, yeah. But do you critique each other? Did you two ever critique each other's performance and get angry? I mean, it's very tough because in your careers you play other people.
Oh, yes.
And then you have to
sure.
be yourselves.
Sure.
Do you ever get it confused and stuff?
Well, I tell you, I think I'm a natural-born collaborator, but I must say that he has learned to tolerate input from me, and then we.
Mr. Davis, you have that look on your face like, she thinks I've learned to tolerate it.
Well, I have almost. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I was quite self-sufficient in my own estimation for all the things that I wanted to do for as long as. But there was always a wife, and she was there, sometimes clamoring to be allowed in. And so when it did happen, it wasn't so bad.
It wasn't so bad.
It turned out to be quite a marvelous arrangement.
Most guys couldn't stand having their wife at work with them.
Yeah, I can understand why that would be difficult going in, but I will say this. If they could allow themselves over the first hump of resentment, which is based on fear, they will find that a very rich land lies beyond that first no saying.
That's very well put.
Yes.
But in actors, and I've worked with actors for a long time myself, sometimes they do upstage each other.
Yes.
Yes. And it's almost instinctive. They know how to keep the camera on them or the audience eye on them. They know how to...
True. But this is extended sibling rivalry. If you learn to adjust and understand yourself in the relationship, and also have a sense of humor so that you can laugh at how ridiculous you are at the height of these moments of great confrontation, something wonderful can happen, and it did with us.
Yes, and we have a different kind of problem. There's one thing that I'm grateful that Ossie's tried to do for me, and that he's tried to get me out from underneath the barrel, you know what I mean, where I scoot, and he says, and so that made him very impatient. This lack of confidence and things like that. So he's tried to.
Do you lack confidence?
Well, I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better. This particular
Well,
project.
you've only been doing it 40 years. What,
Well, is it- but you
I
know
mean,
what?
it's good that you're getting better, but I mean, sooner or later you're going to have to get it here, right?
But that's the truth. But you know what? I won't even go into all the reasons why, you know, a black woman, in marriage, priorities and so forth. But I really
that's
did
interesting.
need. I
No,
needed
that's an
his,
interesting thing, though. You saw yourself as a wife and mother.
Yes, I
And,
really did.
And she was a very good
and a
one.
caretaker.
Yes, and very good at it.
And when the sacrifice came, time for sacrifice, I
You
come from
felt
a
guilty
background-
about doing something for yourself.
Yes, I came from
Interesting.
a different family value time, and so the women today who are coming forth and being more assertive, and I squirm because
I like that, but
hadn't-
sometimes I miss women like you. I mean, don't you? Tell the truth.
No, I have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
You see, Ruby, particularly at the beginning, was in many ways a traditional wife, and I had been taught to expect a traditional wife, a
And he was a
traditional
traditional
relationship,
husband,
very traditional, you know. But little by little, as we stumbled over certain knots in the road, we began to examine our relationship and ourselves. And as I said before, I found on the other side of the mountain, you know, much to be admired.
This is a personal question, but did you ever almost get divorced? Did you ever get to the point where you said, "Hey, man, this ain't going to work. I can't take this"? Never.
And then he really never did, and I don't think I ever did either. But I think you can't have a relationship either between people, or between nations, or between neighbors, where there doesn't arise sometimes conflict and disagreement. Hey, you wish, you know, you're just short of murder.
But you only
That was the original question. Was, did you ever threaten to kill him?
No, there was only one time Ruby left home, in I guess it was the first year of our marriage.
She walked out.
I walked out. It was in the Bronx in an apartment, and there was no heat.
No, I'd walk out too. Hell.
Yeah, Ruby left. so I learned a lesson
Get
from
some
that.
heat, man.
Absolutely.
Get some heat.
And don't
We got a
wait till
clip.
tomorrow. You know, I mean.
Yeah, we got a clip from your show. I want to talk about this show because these are fine actors, and the reviews have been good. I looked at them before I came out here. Let's take a look at the clip, and then you can tell me about this.
Once upon a time was a good old time. The monkey to the back and he spit white line.
Uncle Bud, big cat, little cat, teen-eyed kitten, I'ma kill that little and if you don't stop.
Hold it!
You got to clean that up to bring it in here.
Well, from the looks of the distinguished gentlemen and ladies here assembled, we won't have to clean it up much.
Oh my Lord!
Well, you were laughing when you just looked at that.
Yes, because I can't get over how short I look. You know? Between those two guys.
Yeah, that's cute. Where is the play? What's the theater? Where do they go?
With Crossroads Theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay.
We'll be there through the 21st of May.
Are you going to extend the run or go somewhere else or bring it into the city
We
and
could be
take it on the
persuaded
road?
to
or-
stay there for
Well, we
years.
can't think because they've got another agenda coming up. But it's one of the most exciting times in our lives, Roger, because these places, the places and spaces where you work out, where you become technicians or actors or writers, they're under stress, you know, funding and
They're
that kind of
losing
thing. And this is one of the very important places for actors to work out.
Yeah,
And, so we're
I'm a big proponent of tax breaks for people who invest in the theater. I think, you know, they've given it to oil and gas over the years. They've done a bunch of, now they've closed a lot of loopholes, but I personally think they ought to open the loopholes for theater. It's one of the areas that I think that we ought to invest in, and I don't care if a businessman has a double write-off if the show closes. The chance of it closing are pretty good. I mean, a lot of shows don't make it, but the secret is to have a lot of shows. And
Yes.
a lot of places
Yes.
for actors to work and
for
to
those
write.
talented young people to work out.
Yeah, so I have advocated that time and again because I think that would create more shows and more openings and
More jobs.
more jobs.
And ball players care more about their teams and their upcoming talent than do artists. And that's,
minor leagues.
The minor leagues. And,
Right.
and this is more than minor league today. These places are absolutely essential, I think, to the soul of our country. We've got to keep the arts together, intact,
And alive.
and alive.
You, I read that you did a eulogy at Malcolm X's funeral.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
I knew Malcolm X. I actually did 3 television shows with Malcolm X back in the 1960s. I was a young producer for Westinghouse, and I got to know him. And we're going to have to take a break here. for about 30 seconds. Then we're going to come back. I want to talk about him a little bit.
Okay.
I actually had an interesting kind of relationship because by the third time I worked with him, he and I got to know each other. And when I first met him, of course, he was in his hate Whitey mode, and so he wouldn't shake hands with me. The third time he shook hands with me. It was a very interesting story. We'll talk about it. We'll be back with these very interesting and entertaining people. Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee, after these messages.
I thought you might like these. I guess not. There is nothing like the smell of fresh flowers. Don't you agree, Mother Sister? Summertime, all you can smell is the garbage. Smell overpowers everything, especially the soft, sweet smell of flowers.
We're back talking with one of the theater world's prominent acting couples, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. Tell me about Malcolm X. What was your relationship with him, and what kind of a man was he?
Well, we sort of met Malcolm, I suppose, when everybody else did. It first came to our attention when Louis Lomax, you mentioned Louis Lomax, who happened, incidentally, to have been a classmate of mine in Georgia.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I knew Louis as a personal friend. And he and Mike Wallace were getting together this show on this fiery young man and this group of people called the Black Muslims. And Louis was telling us about it and asking us our relationship. So we sort of got to know of him from that experience.
Right.
Later, there were personal people.
My brother. That's how we really got to know him.
Yes,
So,
and it was her brother who introduced us.
What was his,
my brother.
how did you feel about him? What was his persona like? I have my own observations, but I'm sure they're slightly different than yours. But
Yeah, well, it's like something that's electric, you know, and so, you know, if you touch it, it's going to shock you.
Yeah.
Malcolm had that quality, and I had been bred, particularly coming from the South, to a way of life which could adapt in all circumstances and quite easily to insults, to racism.
Right.
You know, I knew how to make it work.
to maneuver it.
Right. And Malcolm, instead of maneuvering it, said, hey, hold on. Stop, that's racism, and you hate me, I hate you, and that's all. And at first, I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to do that.
That's how he was with me the first time I met him. It was kind of, white devil.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he didn't like, that was a
But
very...
you know, from the first time I met him, my brother Tommy Wallace brought us to one of the meetings. I'd never seen him, and I kept waiting for Malcolm X to come out because there was this tall, skinny guy there cracking jokes and talking about Whitey and saying the same thing over and over. I couldn't believe that was. I didn't know that was Malcolm.
I think if
X.
Malcolm
I
had
expected
lived-
somebody angrier, but he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. And by the third time I met him, which was right before his death, he had, I think, changed. He had gone overseas and come back, and he was changed, and he was much more open. And I have a photograph of me talking with him and producing him on television
Yes, but
shows.
you're right. You know, your racism jerks you around as a human being, and so when we talk about Malcolm turning, becoming a gentler person, he managed to be a black man in America and not go crazy. I think that's what we can really say, because racism is a very jarring experience to a human being.
Did you experience? You've been together for over 40 years now, haven't you?
And we've been married 46
so
years.
back in those days, they had separate restrooms. They had 40 years ago. They still had that, didn't they?
Oh yes, and I can think now of experiences I've had in New York City.
Restaurants and
My first job.
hotels and-
Yes. Oh,
That is
yes,
so
all kinds of
outrageous.
things like that.
It's you've been very successful, and you've made money. You've lived well. You have tremendous respect of everybody in this country. Would your
Relative,
lives? We'll see how it goes after Homeboy. I mean, maybe you're going to tank right after Homeboy. It'll all be gone. Right. But right now, you're a respected couple, right?
Right.
Would your life have been different in any way had you not been African American?
It would have been different, but I hope it would have been just as inspiring and just as worthy of being lived. Most certainly it would have been different.
Would it have been easier?
I suspect it would have been easier,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
you know.
Because even to this day, the images that we'd like to be about in film and in theater have eluded us, because now it's the exception. You know, I congratulate, you know, white America, for example, when it decides to do something noble like breaking down barriers and making things possible, opening up Hollywood, opening up television. You know, when we're going from kindergarten to the first grade in terms of human affairs. I mean, that is white America. All Americans, I hope, that we're moving further along. So we would have done the novels that we wanted
Yes.
to
What
see.
role would you have loved to have played, each of you, that you couldn't play because it went to a white actor, would go to a white actor?
Well, one of our favorite authors, of course, is Zora Neale Hurston. I would have done Jamie and Their Eyes Are Watching God. That's just a things are Barbara Chase Rebow, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Margaret. There's so many authors, Killens and Williams, so many characters that I've wanted to do, that I've maybe done little snippets from, but those that kind of
You're cut off from that. What would
I
you?
would love to have done Toussaint Louverture, you know, the liberator of Haiti, great revolutionary. Of course, the opportunities.
I thought you were going to say I'd like to have been Burt Reynolds and do Burt Reynolds movies. You know?
No, I got close enough to that, and I enjoyed it tremendously. But the truth is, I would love to have done Toussaint Louverture. However, what I am and what life has done to me has not in any way made me say that I would rather have been some other person, some other color, or some other condition. I have enjoyed tremendously being alive at this time and in this place, you know.
And then we've seen people like we've seen the picture begin to change. We've seen producers like Spike Lee come along, and this Hugh Jack Palsy and Singleton,
right.
and people like that. So we began to see change, and now we'd like to see more attention paid to the literature, to the storytellers, and that's what we're about at Crossroads, you know.
Okay, I got to take a break here. We're going to come back. We're going to be back with the Davises, the D, Ms. D, Mr. Davis, and their son on film.
Tell her we can still move. No thing but $125 a month. We got 4 grown people in this house. We can work. We can all work. Move. Lena, I'll work. I'll work 20 hours a day in all the kitchens in Chicago. I'll strap my baby on my back if I have to. And I'll wash all the sheets in America. I'll scrub. We got to go. Got to get out of here.
No, not Ruth. No, honey, please.
What were you saying?
I was just saying Claudia McNeil, she died, as did Diana Sands, as did Lorraine.
Is
So
it
many
tough to
people-
look at people you worked with and know that they passed on?
Yes. You know, that's what death is all about, to remind those of us who live, you know, how important are the fleeting moments. Teach us to number our days, you know, that we may apply our hearts.
Does death
unto wisdom.
frighten you?
No, I find it intriguing. We write about it, you know, in this Two Ha-Has and Homeboy. It doesn't, but it's intriguing.
It's intriguing, but I just assume, I mean, all things considered, I'd rather delay it as long as possible.
Me too.
But same here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, it's not too intriguing to me.
I'm not afraid, but death is not a personal friend. No.
I will go kicking and screaming all the way. I mean, they got
Yes, that's what we deal with that too.
Yeah, do you?
With humor. Yeah. That's part of what we're about, you know, taking things like death and how you
That's a
get
tough
how you
subject.
chuckle out
That's
of
a
that,
tough
you know?
subject to get a laugh on. I mean, a lot of people can't handle death.
It is true.
You know, they get freaked out.
Yeah.
I mean, I see even young people freak out when they talk about that. But I think that's maybe because they're not as centered as they should be. In other words, they don't have a sense of themselves or a sense of infinite wisdom or God or whatever they want to believe in. Are you religious, folks?
In a general,
think so.
and also in a specific
In a
sense,
spiritual
yes.
sense.
But to get back to the young people,
Yeah.
one of the things that we deny our youth now is access to the, those old folk ways and rituals, which taught us how to deal with these great eventualities. There was always a way, a style, a song to it, a dance to it, a
story
moan
to
to
it.
it.
Yeah.
But it was a community affair, and you participated in it. young folks don't have access to that now. They confront death on their own, and that must be most
terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, I consider myself religious, both in the specific sense, you know, that I am roughly a practicing Christian, but I think more importantly, and trying to find a place for myself in the whole universe.
Right.
I have concluded that for me, religion is really to find the center of the universe, to go and sit and wait and see what happens. That's my whole religion.
Why did you marry this guy?
You know, I
Was
didn't
it my
know
money?
You know,
It was your money.
But you
How many
know-
years ago? 46. What were you making 46 years ago?
God,
What was your yearly
nothing.
salary?
I don't think he was in the army. I met him as
He was in the army in 1942
Yes,
in
and-
Liberia. Where were you?
Liberia.
Liberia, right?
Right.
And you know, I had this thing. I found myself falling in love with writers, and I've done that all my life, women and men. You know, I love that. And he was a poet. And I remember my first thing was, besides knitting socks for him, you know, things people don't even knit.
Knitting socks?
Yeah, knitting socks. Oh,
how's
yeah.
that?
It's just I took all his poetry, and I sent it around to
you
magazines.
fell in love?
And yes, I fell in love with his poetry.
Why did you marry her?
Well, she was beautiful.
You get that?
She could cook. And I had determined that was about the best that I could do.
So you didn't know of all these other talents until later, right?
Not in the beginning. I had no idea that she was a writer also.
Really?
I'm just admitting that to myself now.
Who was tougher on Guy? Who was the disciplinarian in the family?
Ruby was.
Ruby was.
Which isn't saying much, but thank God we got a pretty good group. Our two daughters and our son.
Yeah, no, I could take advantage of a certain paternal distance. I was the supervenient spirit who walked in to forgive all of them.
You should
to
hear our kids
explain
talk
all.
about the way their daddy used to punish
You could
them.
say, Ruby, I'd spank those kids if I were you.
I can never. You wait till your daddy comes. My kids want to say,
Am I right?
yes, we'll be happy to wait till daddy comes home.
His daddy's going to let us off the hook.
And yes, and he do little things, pat hands,
Yeah.
lecture. He was a great lecturer and a good little, he gives them.
Hand patter.
But I think that was more affecting for them than anything. Those
Is
are
there a
things they talk
secret to
about today.
parenting? We're starting a show on this network because I have a belief that parenting is one of the most important things we have to deal with today. That we have to learn how to do it well.
Yes, yes.
Is there a secret to it that you found over the years, or was there a
I
theme?
don't know if it's a secret, but parenting to me is the continuation of love. And also a sense that you have a responsibility to mold your connection to the future. Because this isn't all. This day, we do not live in paradise. This is not the end of the world. We're part of a process going we know not where. So we want to make sure that in passage, we leave behind something that represented what we thought the best of us was. And children, loving, training them, sharing, giving them a little package to take on into the future. That's
very
what
nice.
parenting is.
I have to wrap it up here, but
I know, I was gonna wrap it up with-
Ruby D.
We have to be radicals if we're going to be good parents.
Ossie
We've gotta
Davis,
change the
thank you.
society.
Radicals if we have to be.
We have to be radicals if we're going to be good parents. We got to start changing the society, changing ourselves, relationship to society. It's
We'll
a
get
big
into
deal.
that next
Oh,
time. You'll come back.
next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Good luck with two ha-has and a homeboy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the two of America's finest actors, just wonderful people, Ruby D. and Ossie Davis. Don't miss their play. And I hope this thing continues. I want to get to see it. So try to get an
We'll bear
extended
that in
run if
mind.
you can. Okay.
Yes, yes,
All right. We'll be back